Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us for this segment, we have Sanjana Prabhakar, index research specialist with Nasdaq Investment Intelligence, to discuss the performance of the Nasdaq suite of indexes for the month of August. Sanjana, it's great to see you as always. Welcome back to Trade Talks and give us an overview of the environment for August.
Sure, Jill. So doing a quick check-in on the performance of the 107 indexes that we track. For the month of August, 93% of the indexes finished in negative territory, while the remaining 7% ended the month in green. So performance was mostly negative for the month of August, and the average return that we saw for the month of August was a loss of 4%, which was the worst average monthly performance since the start of the year. And as you can see in the slides, the Nasdaq 100 was down 1.6%, breaking its streak of 5 consecutive months of positive returns. And in a month that has historically been difficult for the markets, investors exercised caution as they contended with higher treasury yields, ongoing problems in China, and uncertainty surrounding both the economy and monetary policy.
All right, let's keep that slide up there for a moment. Sanjana, review the performance. You mentioned the Nasdaq 100, but some of our other global and featured indexes.
Sure. So of the 107 indexes that we track, the best performing index was the Nasdaq Sprott Junior Uranium Miners Index, which gained 13%, while the worst performing index was the Nasdaq OMX Wind, which fell about 16%. And as you can see in the slide here, we track the Nasdaq featured global indexes and Nordic indexes. Within the Nasdaq featured index lineup, the Nasdaq 100 was the relative outperformer, down 1.6%, while the Nasdaq Innovators Completion Cap Index was the relative underperformer, down 10.2%. And as you can see, we have highlighted KBW Nasdaq Bank Index here, which underperformed after 2 months of consecutive gains, registering losses of 8.8%. And on an average, the Nasdaq featured indexes registered losses of 4.4%. And as you can see in the in the same slide here, the Nasdaq US Large Cap Index was the relative outperformer of the 9 global indexes that we track, down 1.8%, while the Nasdaq US Small Cap, Nasdaq Emerging Markets Index were the relative underperformers, down 5.8 and 5.7 respectively. And what we really wanted to highlight here was that emerging markets had a pretty challenging August due to ongoing problems in China and a stronger dollar, underperforming the global index, which has benefited from the run in mega cap names. And quickly on the Nordic index suite, as you can see here, they were down about 1.4% on average, with the Nordic OMX Nordic 40, the only index that finished in positive territory, and one of 7 indexes of the total 107 indexes that we track that were up for the month.
Let's take a look at your next slide here, where we're taking a look at thematic ESG and green economy indexes.
Sure. So as you can see here, the thematic ESG indexes, they also posted average losses of 5.8%. As I mentioned earlier, the Nasdaq Sprott Junior Uranium Miners Index was the relative outperformer and the only index which posted positive returns, registering gains of 13%, while the Nasdaq Clean Edge Green Energy Index was the relative underperformer, registering losses of 13%. If you look at the green economy indexes, they also registered average losses of 5.8%. What stands out here is the Nasdaq OMX US Water Index, which was the relative outperformer, down 1.4%, while the Nasdaq OMX Wind was the relative underperformer, down 16%. And as you can tell, the wind energy industry has been under pressure since 2022 as rising inflation, reduced tax incentives and high interest rates have negatively affected wind turbine manufacturers. And more recently, we have heard news of the offshore wind industry also coming under pressure from supply chain delays, which has affected the performance of the suite here. And if you can see the Nasdaq option suite, they finished in the red with an average loss of 1%, and it was a relative bright spot with average losses that were relatively more muted when compared to other indexes. And the outperformer of this group was the Nasdaq Credit Suisse, the Credit Suisse's Nasdaq WTI Crude Oil Flow Total Return Index.
And moving along, let's take a look at our indexes around factors, right? Dividend and income, some of our momentum indexes with Nasdaq Dorsey, right?
Sure. As you can see in the slide here, we've captured the performance of the dividend income and the Dorsey Wright suite. All but one of the Nasdaq dividend and income indexes were down for the month, so pretty challenging month. We saw the Nasdaq US Dividend Achievers Index, the DAY, which was the relative outperformer, up 2.7%, while the DAT was the relative underperformer, down 4.5%. And we believe that the underperformance of the financials and the energy sectors thus far this year, which are major sources of dividends to US investors, has resulted in the relative underperformance of the suite of indexes. And if you look at our Dorsey Wright suite here, all but two indexes were down. And you see the Dorsey Wright Energy Technical Leaders Index, the outperformer, up 2.4% for the month.
And finally, let's wrap up with our thematic tech indexes.
Sure. And this slide is pretty interesting. I mean, we have been talking a lot about AI in our recent trade talks and the momentum that AI has given to many of our indexes. We see here that AI, which dominated the suite of Nasdaq thematic indexes in July, fell out of favor in August, with the Nasdaq CTA Artificial Intelligence Index, the Nasdaq the NQ Robo, which is the Nasdaq CTA Artificial Intelligence and Robotics Index, and the NYG Big, all down for the month of August. And the four indexes within the suite, which registered positive returns, of the four indexes, three indexes tracked cybersecurity. And if you see, Nasdaq Global Disruptive Tech Index was the top performing across the suite, gaining 2.3%, while the worst performing was the Nasdaq CTA Global Digital Health Index, which fell 16% for the month.
All right. Appreciate the insight as always, Sanjana. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thank you very much, Jill.